Hello and welcome to Fireside Fairytales. If you've never been here before, my name is Rory and you are watching Varietal Literature's YouTube page, which is a cozy little corner of the internet for narrative. And if you are watching live, pardon me, off to the side, I forget what side it is, there is a live stream chat going on, is what I rather meant to say. And it's already being populated with a few little crusts of potatoes. Specifically by Uncle Kitty, who says this guy would have been popular among the Celts. I think we'll see that he is. Speaking, of course, to the title of this video, which is about a fellow who can cure baldness. Tammy says, good evening, everyone. Hope everyone had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Oh, that's right. Americans had a Memorial Day weekend. I can talk. Just got to get all these marbles out of my mouth. GS says, good evening. GS says, this will put Rory in the algorithm. Indeed, people looking to cure baldness. I'm sorry to say that the solutions proposed in this tale might not be worth the risk. Jumpstore says, bad week for my people, indeed. So please give me some more escapism, Rory will do. Okay. What are we doing tonight? Well, what I do in this show, of course, is I read old folklore and fairy tales live. You folks can follow along in the chat. Tonight we're going to be continue reading from, pardon me, Clan Traditions and Popular Tales of the Western Highlands and Islands. I did consider that I was reading too much from one book several weeks in a row, which some people don't like. But it's not a very long book, and I feel motivated to simply finish it out. Which we're not going to do this evening, but we're very near to. So, the center story that I was highlighting there, the blacksmith that cured baldness, if you are looking to... if you are not watching this live, sorry, I've gotten myself off track. If you are not watching this live, down in the description below, there will be timestamps which lets you skip ahead to whatever you want to watch. And if you just want to watch the story about the fellow who cures baldness, it's called O'Neill and how the hair of his head was made to grow. But it's actually the second story we're reading tonight. This will probably be a shorter stream. However, allow me to add something. I do have a third possible tale. When we get there, though, I will explain why I'm like, on reading it. If folks want me to read it, I will. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Which is to say, what is the theme that ties these stories together? Well, it's basically the region they're from. These are all tales from the Western Highlands. We've been reading through a couple of them. We started in this book with some legends. Legends, as we explained, are tales probably somewhat fictionalized or expanded upon, or almost certainly anyways, but they are based on real, historically validated people, like people that we know existed. So we started with some legends from the Western Highlands, and then we, I think this might be a little tight on my throat. And then we were going to look at some folklore last time, which was two tales of two brothers and then two sisters, which were said to be linked, although they didn't really have any common themes or characters between them. But we read that last week. That also is Tales of the Western Highland. And so what we're reading this week is the other two folk tales it offers us from the Western Highlands, one of which I don't really understand the ending of, so we'll see how people feel about that. And another that gives us a bit of a cultural insight to how Scotland regarded the Norse folk at the era of time that we're going to be reading from. It's not very well regarded. So, that is what we're doing tonight. That's enough talking from me, I think. So allow me to introduce our first story. But of course, it is Scotland, so it's got to be raining. And of course, let me know if there's anything off about the sound or anything. Our first tale of the night is called The Dark or Pitch Pine, Daughter of the Norse King, and How She Thinned the Woods of Loch Avar. Which comes to us from Clan Traditions and Popular Tales of the Western Highlands and Islands, a book you can read for free pretty much anywhere online. And you should, it's very good. When the Norsemen came, their visits were frequent and numerous. To this country and these islands, to lay claim to lay claim to and take possession of the land. The fame they gathered for themselves through their indulgence in every manner of cruel spoliation and slaughter of the people wherever they landed was that they were bold, courageous, hardy, and rough, peremptory and unscrupulous race. And more than that, it was attributed to them that they practiced witchcraft, charms, and enchantments, and had much of other unhallowed learning among them. I will just say the little bit of history I do know about this era before I carry on with the story. It's not an unfair account, but it also is colored a bit by regional grievances. Keep that in mind. The Norse king's eldest daughter was particularly noted for her knowledge of the black art. There was no accident or mischance that befell friends, or destruction that overtook enemies, or any luck or good fortune that attended either friend or foe, but it was said that she was the cause of it, or had some hand in it. She was famed at home and abroad, far and wide, for her skill among cows and cattle. She was said to possess every variety of dairy knowledge in her father's kingdom. There was no charm or evil eye that fell on any living creature in the fold, but she could dispel and avert nor hurt nor injury they got, but she could heal nor dizziness nor fits into which they fell, from which she could not restore them, until it was said of her that the lowing of cattle, the incoherent cry of calves, and the rough cry of yearlings was to her the sweetest and most soothing music, and that she would answer the call of cattle, though she might be lost in the midst of the northern woods, and the cry from the nethermost part of the farthest off quarter of the universe. How about that sentence? It's a beefy sentence. She knew the herb that had the property of taking its qualities from milk, as well as she was acquainted with the spells by which its virtues could be restored, and every charm and invocation that was practiced or then esteemed. The flowers of the meadow and the woods were as familiar to her as the ridges of corn or a grain on straw, and there was not a leaf on tree, bush, or shrub with whose properties she was not acquainted. Her father's kingdom was clothed with pine wood, and was then, as now, famous for the fine quality of wood from which most of the wealth of the kingdom was obtained. One of those times when the Norsemen came to Scotland to take possession of and subdivide the land thus taken, they observed that the pine wood of the Loch Avar was growing so fast and extending so far that in time it might supersede the Black Forests of Sweden. But on this occasion the northern forces were driven back. On reaching home they reported the matter to the king, and their opinion that the increase of the wood must be checked, otherwise his northern woods would be of little esteem. It occurred to the king to consult his daughter on the matter, and since she was learned, and to get knowledge from her of the best method of thinning and destroying that Scottish wood. She gave him the desired information, but said that she must be the bearer of the method, and must necessarily go to Scotland herself. She obtained the king's permission, and made preparations for the journey. From the gifts she possessed, neither sea nor land, air nor earth could hinder her progress until she accomplished her purpose. And when she reached Lochaber, the method she adopted was to kindle a fire in the selvage of her dress. And she then began to go through the woods. And as she could travel in the clouds as well as on the ground, when she ascended and whirled in the air, the sparks of fire that flew from her dress were blown hither and thither by the wind, and set the woods on fire, until the whole country was almost in a blaze, and so darkened by the smoke that one could hardly see before them. And from being blackened more than any tree in the forest by the smoke and soot of the fiery furnace which surrounded her, she was known and spoken of by the name of Dark, or Pitch Pine. The people gathered to watch her, but for the rapidity of her ascent and the swiftness with which she descended, they could not grasp her any more than they could prevent her, and were at a loss what to do. At last, they sought instruction from a learned man in the palace. He advised them to collect a herd of cattle in a fold, wherever she would stand still, and whenever she heard the lowing of cattle, she would descend, and then when she was within gunshot, they were to fire with a silver bullet, and upon which she would become I know we all know what this means, but as I've covered before, the YouTube algorithm does not know this word had a different meaning at one point. So a bundle of bones, because that word is also a slur now. They followed this advice and began to gather cattle and follow after her until the pinfold, large and small, was full set in the center of Kintel. Whenever she heard the cry of the herd, she descended, and they aimed at her with the silver bullet, as the wise man told them to do, and she fell gently among them. Men lifted the remains and carried them to Lochaber, and to make sure that dead or alive she would do no more injury to them, they buried her in Achnakerry, and the person from whom the story was first heard 9 years ago, or in that time would have been 1880, said that he could put his foot on the place where she was buried. The Norse king was amazed at his daughter not returning, and at his not receiving any account from her. He sent abroad to get tidings of her, and when the news of the disaster that happened to her was brought to him, he sent a boat and crew to bring her home. But the Lochaber woman, by their incantations, destroyed those whom he sent. The boat was wrecked, and the men were lost at the entrance of Lochael. The next ship that came were not more successful. The third time the king sent out his most powerful fleet. What they did then was to send and try through spells to dry up the wells of the fairy hill of Iona. The virtue of these wells was that wind could be obtained from any desired quarter by emptying them in the direction of the wind wished for. When the ships were seen approaching, the wells began to be emptied, and before the last handful was flung out, the storm was so violent that the ships so near that the whole fleet was driven to the beach under the fairy hill, and the power and might of the Norsemen was broken and so much weakened that they did not return again to infest the land. Our first tale there then being a story of trying to maintain your kingdom's resources. Resource superiority, I should say. They're doing the equivalent of setting oil wells on fire here. Tammy Morelli says, no tea tonight, Rory. No tea tonight. Pretty much from like May to September, it's usually too warm for me to have tea. Just like the visual in the story. Which one was it? The of her swirling around, lighting the forest on fire, I assume? Okay. Well, that's a more like grim story. And while it has fantastical and folkloric elements, obviously the fantastical and folkloric elements don't need to be there for that story to have some accuracy to it. Obviously, starting forest fires is a potential weapon of war. Uncle Kitty says, rare it is, I hear the Norse compared to Fae. It is an interesting perspective. I wouldn't say it's a super rare one in folklore, but it isn't a common one that I read in folklore, which is outsider perspectives in the Norse. Because, you know, they didn't really... I mean, they did, but they didn't quite have the reputation of raiding places like Germany, which is one of the main places I read lore from. You know, Scotland, especially the Orkney Isles, in England, along the Thames and stuff like that's where you get the most accounts of, like, the Norsemen coming in and raiding and pillaging and so on. And in those kind of accounts, you will see a more mysterious, evil portrayal of it. The other place that you see it is the Norse. The Norwegians and the Finns did not get along for a period of time in history. I don't know enough about the history of the two regions to know specifically why, but I'm going to assume they were fighting for land and resources, because that's usually what it is. But anyways, what you'll see then is in Norwegian specifically lore, the Finns painted as like black magic users and stuff like that, horrible creatures. Jumpstore says, I don't know if iced teas have caught on in Canada. It's not the cultural pillar that it is in like southern US. I mean, we definitely have iced tea, but like we don't make it. Nobody's like proud of their sweet iced tea recipe the way you might get in like a place like Alabama or wherever. But you do get like, you know, Nest tea and stuff, but I don't like that. So yeah, not so much. You know, actually, Canada in general likes coffee. Not to say it doesn't have an aversion to tea the way some quadrants of the US do, but coffee. And so what you'll see more often is cold coffees. Suki says, hi, Rory, from both of us. Well, hello to both of you. I'm assuming Suki and Matsuba. Okay. Our next tale is called O'Neill and How the Hair of His Head Was Made to Grow. It is the title story. I'm going to say that the ending of this, I've read a few times, and I feel like an idiot because I know somebody in the chat's going to get it right away. But I don't get what it's saying. And chat, you're going to have to help me explain to my dumb brain how this works. Yeah, Jump Story, that sounds a lot more appealing. Real tease sounds a lot more appealing to me. If you are a person who is hairline challenged, I will also be curious at the end of the story whether if somebody came to you and explained to you what they had to do to help you grow hair, whether you would do it. Our second story of the night is called O'Neill and How the Hair of His Head Was Made to Grow. This makes sense because I have a bunch of Scots in my family and they're all bald. All of them. This comes to us from the clan traditions and popular tales of the Western Highlands and Islands. And it goes as such. There was a smith before now in Ireland, who was one day working in the smithy when a youth came in, having 2 old women with him. He said to the smith, "I would be obliged to you," he said, "if you would let me have a while at the bellows and the anvil." The smith said he would. He then caught the 2 old women, threw a hoop about their middle, and placed them in the smithy fire? And blew the bellows at them, and then took them out and made one woman, the fairest that the eye ever saw from the 2 old women. This is not a very nice tale. It's a horrible concept. When the smith laid down at night, he said to his wife, "A man came this way of the smithy today, having with him 2 old women. He asked from me a while of the bellows and anvil, and he made the fairest woman that the man's eye ever saw out of the 2 old women. My own mother and your mother are here with us, and I think I will try to make one right woman of the 2, since I saw the other man doing it." Which again is throwing a hoop around them and throwing them in a fire. Let's get the read. Then his wife says, "Do," she said. "I am quite willing." Why? Why are you willing? Next day he took out the 2 old women, put the hoop about their middle, and threw them in the smithy fire. And it was not long before it became likely that he would not have even the bones of them left. The smith was in extremity, not knowing what to do, but a voice came behind him. "You are perplexed, smith, but perhaps I will put you right." With that he caught the bellows and blew harder at them. He then took them out and put them on the anvil, and made as fair a woman out of the 2 old wives. Then he said to the smith, "You had need of me today. But," said he, "you better engage me. I will not ask from you but the half of what I earn, and that this will be in the agreement, that I shall have a third of my own will." And the smith engaged him. At this time O'Neill sent abroad word that he wanted one who would make the hair of his head grow, for there was none on the head of O'Neill or O'Donnell his brother, and that whoever could do it would get the 4th part of his means. And the servant lad said to the smith, "We'd better go and make the bargain with O'Neill, that we will put hair on his head." Then they did this. "Say you to him," said the servant lad, "that ye have a servant who will put hair on his head for the 4th part of what he possesses." O'Neill was agreeable to this, and the servant lad desired to get a room for themselves, and asked a cauldron to be put on a good fire. It was done as he wished. O'Neill was taken in, stretched on a table. The servant lad then took hold of an axe and threw off O'Neill's head clean at the neck, put it face foremost in the cauldron. And after some time he took hold of a large prong which he had, and he lifted the head with it, and the hair was beginning to come upon it. In a while he lifted it up again with the same prong, and this time a ply of thin yellow hair would go round his hand. And then he gave the head such a lift and stuck it on the body, and O'Neill then called out to him to make haste and let him rise to his feet. And when he saw the fine yellow hair coming into his eyes, he did as he had promised. He gave the smith and the servant lad the fourth part of his possessions, and when they were going home with the cattle, the servant lad said to the smith, "We are now going to separate. We'll make 2 halves or divisions of the cattle." Well, the smith was not willing to agree to this, but since it was in his bargain, he got the 1 half. They then parted, and the animal the smith would not lose now, he would lose again. He did not know where he was going before he reached home, and he had only 1 old cow that he did not lose of the cattle. Now when O'Donnell saw his brother's hair, he sent out word that he would give the 3rd part of his property to anyone who would do the same to himself. The smith thought he would try to do it this time alone. He went to where O'Donnell... I should pause. He saw a man throw a hoop around 2 women, toss them into a fire, and hammer them on an anvil, and make 1 beautiful woman. And when he tried to imitate this person's work, he nearly burned 2 old women to death. That's facts that have happened in the story so far. Second, he saw his own head get cut off, boiled in a pot, and then brought back to life with hair on it. And despite the earlier experience, he says to his brother, "Don't you worry, buddy. I know how to chop your head off and boil it. You'll be fine." Well, anyways, he went to where O'Donnell was and said to him that he would put hair on his head for him also, as he had done to his brother O'Neill. And then he asked the cauldron be put on and a good fire below it. And then he took O'Donnell into a room, tied him on a table, then took up an axe and cut off his head and threw it face downwards into the cauldron. And in a while he took the prongs to see if the hair was growing, but instead of the hair growing, the jaws were nearly falling out. The smith was almost out of his senses, not knowing what to do. And when he heard a voice behind him saying to him, "You are in a strait," this was the lad with the black art he formerly had returned. He blew at the cauldron stronger and stronger, brought the prong to see how the head was doing or if the hair was growing, and the next time he tried it, it would twine round his hand. Since it was so long of growing on it, he said, "We will put an additional fold around my hand." And when he tried it again, it would reach 2 twists. He took it out of the cauldron and stuck it on the body, and it cried to be quickly let go. And when he saw his yellow hair down on his shoulders, the hair pleased him greatly. It was more abundant than that of O'Neill, his brother. They got fully what was promised them, and they were going on their way home. But the lad who had the black art said, "Had we not better divide the cattle?" We will not, said the smith. "Lift them with you, since I got clear." "Well," said the other, "if you'd said that before, you would not have gone home empty-handed, or with only 1 cow. And with that he said, "You will take every one of them, and I will take none of them." The smith went home with that herd, and he did not require to strike a blow in his smithy, neither did he meet with the one with the black art ever after. Jess says, is this a math problem? Maybe. Maybe that's what I'm missing here. The story itself is entertaining to me, but the story is obviously making a point that I am failing to grasp. So I'm curious if anybody here has their own interpretation of what that means. This line here, we will not, had we not better divide the cattle? We will not, said the smith, lift them with you since I got clear. I don't know what that means. All right. Now here is the choice. The next section of the book, and the last section of the book that I would read, is a collection of beast fables. Now, most of them are pretty interesting fables that I would say are new to us. The beast fables, though, the reason why I'm saying it's up to you guys what I do, is the first beast fable is one that we've read in 2 other collections with 2 other sort of renditions to it. And that is The Wolf and the Fox and The Barrel of Butter. It's pretty similar to the last one we read. In fact, I would suspect they share either a source or this is the source for that one. It's slightly different. The ending is a little different, but not substantially. So the question is, do you want me to read? Maybe I could make this a survey or something, unless it's very obvious in the chat. Do you guys want to hear The Wolf and the Fox yet again, or should we call it? I'll give you guys a second to let me know what you want to do. Uncle Kitty says, the only thing I know of the old Celts is that to be leader, you had to be perfect physical form to remain leader. I.e., you went bald, you got deposed. I mean, that's true far beyond the Celts. Nietzsche has a good analysis of that in Genealogy of Morals, I think. Just about the fact that the outward health and state and beauty of a person was seen to be indicative of the inward health and beauty of a person for a very long time in history. Okay. Everyone wants to hear this story. So, what I'll say to my regular audience, it's not so different that if you're like, I do not want to hear that Wolf and Fox story again, you're missing anything. You know, you're welcome to tune out. Got this tale about the hare. Thank you so much for watching and so on. But for those of you who want to stay, or who maybe have not heard the Wolf and the Fox story, let me give you the little bit of preamble that I gave before. The fox is very much a kind of Bugs Bunny character in folklore. Beyond Celtic cultures, all the way over to Ukraine. In fact, the first series of fox tales that I read, where I did see a version of this tale, was a Ukrainian collection that I read a couple of years ago. You also see it in Norse. So, you know, like, for example, there's a Norse tale of the fox tricking the bear to stick its butt in the river, and that's supposed to be how they tore their tail off, because it's a story about how the bear has a nubbed tail. Although, as I said before, sometimes that's a cat. But what the fox is in these folklore is it's kind of the person who makes trouble for the sake of trouble. It is maybe quite literally, by the way, a Loki. There is reason, I think, more so than normal reason to believe that the reason why the fox shows up in so many pieces of European folklore across the continent, often in similar stories, always with the same personality, though, is in part because this is how foxes are. You know, they're clever, they broke into chicken huts and killed your flocks and whatever. But also, shape-shifting gods into animals was a thing in mythology, and folklore is often informed by that. So, exactly what the fox is here, we might be able to assume is more than a fox. The fox is often paired with the wolf in these stories. The one from Ukraine is a series of fox and wolf stories. And usually some birds and stuff come in as well. But the fox and wolf always go together. I don't know what informs that. But I'd be interested to hear theories. Okay. Our third and last tale of the night is called The Wolf and the Fox. A tale we've read a few different versions of from different cultures, but this one comes to us from the clan traditions and popular tales of the Western Highlands and Islands. And I am going to skip the beginning because it's just the author giving some context. You're welcome to read it in your own time. The fox and wolf were keeping house together near the shore, and as might naturally be expected, were very poor, and at times hard up for food. At first, the fox kept himself in good condition, was not so voracious as the wolf. After a heavy storm in winter-time, the two went along the shore to see what was cast up by the sea. This is still done by the poor people in the island in those places where wood does not grow. They are often fortunate enough to find logs and planks of wood. On the occasion of the wolf and fox's journey, they were fortunate enough to find a keg of butter. Butter. Probably it had come from Ireland and been swept or thrown overboard in the storm. Even in this time, Ireland had famous butter. It was particularly welcome to the poor finders, and the rascally fox at once coveted it for himself. He said to the wolf, as this was the winter time, they had not so much need of it, but when the hungry summer would come, it would be doubly welcome. They had better bury it, and no one would know of its existence but themselves. They dug a deep hole, buried the keg of butter, and went home with their other provisions. Some days after that, the fox came in, and wearily throwing himself on a settle or seat which formed part of the furniture, he heaved a deep sigh and said, "Alas, alas, woe is me." "Alas, alas," said the sympathizing wolf, "what is it that troubles you?" "Dear me," said the fox, "they are wanting me out at a christening." Still pretending a weary indifference, and the Gaelic expression is here noticeable, as being asked out to a baptism means literally being asked to be the godfather or gossip at the baptism, a practice observed in the Highlands even where the Roman Catholic and Episcopal systems have disappeared. "Alas, alas," said the wolf, "are you going?" "Alas, alas," said the fox, "I am." And when he came home, the wolf asked what the name they had given the child. "A queer enough name," said the fox, "Blazim," which is, "let me taste." Now some days after that again, the same maneuver was gone through, and when the fox returned and the wolf asked him the child's name, he said it was as queer a name as the former one, beheaded, be in its middle. A third time the maneuver was gone through, and the child's name was said to be the queerest of all, Shrub and Claw, Scrape the Stave, rather. At last the hungry summer came, and it was such as is well known even in eastern countries, when the stores of the preceding harvest are exhausted, and the stores of the year's harvest are not yet ready. The fox and the wolf went for the keg of butter, but it had disappeared. The fox, being prepared for this emergency, began at once to accuse the wolf of having taken it. "No one knew it was there but our two selves, and I see the color of it on your fur." Well, the two went away home, the wolf very much cast down, and the fox persisting in his accusation that the wolf had stolen it. And the wolf solemnly protested that he had never touched it. "Will you swear, then?" the fox said. "According to a Highland proverb, protestations may be loud till they are solemn oaths." The wolf then held up its paw with the great solemnity and emitted this oath: "Aye, if it will be that I stole the butter, and it be, may disease lie heavy on my green belly in the dust, in the dust. Swear now yourself." But the fox was so impressed by the dignity and reverence of the oath that he tried every means in his power to evade so solemn an ordeal. But the wolf would take no refusal, and at last the fox emitted this oath: If it be that I stole the butter, and it be worm, we can worm, why can worm me few rare. The student of language will particularly observe how the Gaelic C corresponds to the English wa. This is particularly noticeable here, as the difference renders the oath as ludicrous in the translation as in the original, if not more so. For the wolf said nothing, but the fox, with that persistence which often accompanies evil doing, suggested that they should both stand in front of the fire, and whoever began to sweat first would be the guilty party, as the butter would be oozing out through him. Well, the wolf, thinking no evil, consented, and the fox thought he would get him to stand nearer to the fire than himself. It so turned out, however, that the fox, who had kept himself in good condition, so to speak, by repeated visits to that keg of butter, and they must have been more frequent than the baptisms to which he'd been called, was getting uncomfortably warm, and said, We are long enough at this work. We had better go out and take a walk." When out thus cooling themselves, they passed a smithy door, at which an old white horse was standing with the point of its hind shoe resting on the ground. The wolf, having gone over to it, but at a safe distance, and looking intently at the door, said to the fox, "I wish, as your eyesight is better than mine, you can read better than I can, that you should come over and read the name written on the bottom of the horseshoe." Well, the fox came over, but he could see no writing on the shoe. He was flattered by the wolf's words, and not liking to confess that his eyesight was failing, the fox went closer, and closer, till the horse lifted its foot and knocked its brains out. "I see," said the wolf. "The greatest scholars are not always the wisest clerks." Or excessive scholarship is not always the best. And that is the end of the story, abrupt as it is. Two things that I noticed that are different from this account than most. In this account, they don't tell you explicitly that the fox is stealing the butter until pretty late in the story, until they're in the cave there. Instead, they just say the fox is going to baptisms. I think the names are about the same, though. And then the other thing is the endings of these stories vary widely. Like, I think in the Ukrainian one, the fox just sort of runs away or something like that. He gets away with it anyways. But in the last one we read, I'm trying to remember what book that was in. And in this one, he gets killed by getting kicked, being outsmarted by the wolf. Though I'll say often the fox doesn't lose. Usually the fox does terrible things like tricks a bird into letting him eat their babes, things like that, and just gets away with it. Gio says, yes, previously we knew from the get-go that he ate the butter. All I can really think of what probably informs that variation, I mean, there's no academic value in my speculation here, but this is my own interest, is I suspect if I was telling this to kids versus adults, right? Like with a kid, I wouldn't think the average kid would necessarily think the worst of the fox. They just kind of go along with stories, usually, kids. But this one definitely gives you the wolf's view almost from the start to the end, which creates a different dynamic. As Jumpstore says, this one made the reader use some deduction skills to figure it out, which is a perfect story for inquisitive children. Yeah, it's sort of a different perspective on what a child can do or can't do. Yeah, the variations to me are interesting, but I do understand that I don't want my streams to just be the same 25 stories every 2 months. So I try not to read too many repeats, but yeah, I do find it interesting. There are 3 other beast fables. I'll probably just read them next week unless I find something I really want to read next week elsewise. But I will get to those 3 other beast fables, and then we will be pretty much out of this book. Which is a shame, because I've really enjoyed this book. It is considered one of the more iconic folklore collections of the time. Sharon says, watching this while I work. Also, hello, Sharon. Thank you for tuning in. I'm just checking out, so I hope I'm not robbing you of company as I do so. As for me, well, I don't have much to say other than to say thank you very much, Suki Matsuba, Tammy Morelli, GS Uncle Kitty, Jumpstore, Sharon, whoever it is that may be out there lurking in the background. Thank you folks very much for tuning in, keeping me company, and hearing the stories. If you do want to hear more stories, I have a rather large playlist at this point of Fireside Fairytales. You can go through and find something that interests you. As for me, I will keep the fire warm. You folks have yourself a nice sleep.